Hello, everyone, and welcome to Rise of the Phoenix Coach. I'm Amy, a nurse, trauma-informed coach, and someone who's walked through the fire and chose to rise. Before we begin, a quick note. This podcast includes real, unfiltered conversations about trauma, addiction, mental health, and recovery. Some topics may feel intense or triggering. Please listen with care, take breaks if needed, and always honor where you are in your own journey. This space is not about perfection. It's about truth, it's about healing, and it's about rising again, again, and again. If you've ever felt broken, lost, or stuck in survival mode, you're not alone, and you're not beyond repair. Here we turn pain into power. We rewrite old stories, and we reclaim the parts of ourselves we were never meant to lose. This is Rise of the Phoenix Coach. So let's go ahead and begin. And today I would like to introduce our guest, Ed Rivera, who is an author, an entrepreneur, and a storyteller dedicated to turning real life experiences into meaningful, impactful work. As an author, Ed is best known for his Child's Eyes series, a deeply personal collection that explores childhood trauma, healing, and the journey towards understanding generational cycles. Through his writing, Ed brings raw honesty and emotional depth, offering readers not just stories, but reflection, connection, and hope. His work is rooted in the belief that you can't break a cycle until you understand it, and that healing begins when the truth is faced. Beyond writing, Ed is also owner of Halo Alarm Solutions, LLC, and Distinguished Gentleman, Alternative Hair Solutions, LLC, where he has built businesses centered on trust, professionalism, and genuine care for people. Whether protecting homes or helping clients regain confidence, his mission remains the same: improving lives through meaningful service. Ed's work, both on the page and in business, is driven by resilience, growth, and a commitment to leaving a lasting impact. So welcome, Ed. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. So give us, if you will, give us a little bit of background on yourself and why the work that you do.
Well, I'm a 55-year-old male. I grew up in California primarily. At a young age, as far back as I can remember, probably 3 or 4 years old, that's when the trauma that I remember started. And it lasted until until I moved out in my teen years, about 15 years old, I moved out. So, because of my trauma as a child, obviously, a broken child turns into a broken teenager, and a broken teenager turns into a broken adult. So, obviously, that followed me all through my life. That trauma that I was subjected to. And I see or have seen where that, looking back now, as a 55-year-old, looking back now, I can see where that trauma really affected me growing up and having my own children.
Yeah. Do you mind discussing it all? And you don't have to go into any kind of detail. Just a little bit about what type of trauma you grew up
Sure.
with. Yeah.
Well, my father was a Korean War veteran. So by the time that I was born, he was already 40 years old. So he already had a life ahead of him, and he also had a lot of baggage that he carried with him. And that's part of the understanding the cycle, later on that I discovered. But he was an alcoholic. He was facing a lot of demons that he didn't openly talk about, and so there was a lot of physical abuse. There was a lot of emotional abuse. where it's like he got pleasure out of seeing me suffer, and doing things intentionally to make me suffer. One particular instance was, he uh, he he took pleasure out of drawing this picture of what I can only describe, and what I described in my books, as an African lady with a bone in her nose, and like a tribal African lady. And he drew this up nice and neat and put makeup on her and everything. And I'm about 4 years old at the time. And he hung it above my bed. And every night I had to kiss this picture before going to sleep.
Mm.
And of course, as a 4-year-old, I don't understand what's going on, and even though I was, no, I don't want to do that. It turned into a physical part where I'd get a beating if I didn't. So that's where the emotional trauma, comes in also. And I've said, and I think people would agree, that physical trauma, at some point, you don't even remember how that feels. But those emotional scars that you take along with you, those are the ones that linger with you, and they stay with you, and they hurt. And the thing about it, Amy, is when I started writing my books, it was more so a release for myself to just kind of get it out. I had never really openly talked about my past in depth like that, not even with my own siblings.
Yeah.
They knew that there was trauma. They knew, they lived in the same household, but they didn't know that I held it so deeply, and I just never openly discussed it. And when I started writing my books, and it really started to flow out, is when I really started to see that, partially it was still affecting me. It affected me to have to write it. You know what I mean? So that's only one of, the few emotional things that took place. Another time I remember, us all loading up in the car to go to the grocery store. I begged to go in with my mom, because I knew that every time I stayed in the car with him, which was my father, that he was just going to terrorize me, because, like I say, he took pleasure in terrorizing me. So another particular instance, as soon as my mom got out of sight, he took his finger, he dug deep in his nose, and he pulled out a snot, and tried to force me to eat it.
Oh.
And all my siblings are there in the car, and I'm crying, and he's pushing this toward me, and eat it, and of course I never did, but my mom would come back, and she'd even say, "What, are you picking on him again?" No, blah blah blah. But here's the thing, Amy, is my mom knew it was going on, but she just didn't have the strength or desire to do anything about it.
I think a lot of those situations, the other parent, I think it's a combination of things for a lot of them. I think sometimes it is, denial that it's as bad as it is. And I think sometimes, like for my own instance, my mom was unable to protect herself. So how would she also be able to protect me?
Right.
In your situation, maybe she was in denial about what was really going on, and the depth of it. And I'm so sorry you went through all that. That's really hard. Um, did he treat your siblings differently, or was he similar with them as well?
my brother, which is a year older than I am, he is the junior.
Mhm.
So I was considered the weakling.
Okay.
Um, later, later on in life, I discovered that he, for some reason, didn't even think that I was his. He thought he was a very jealous man. He thought my mom was cheating on him, and he thought that I was, the subject of you know of the cheating, and so to answer your question, no, he didn't treat my other siblings like that. There was three girls, my brother and I, um, and even to this day, Amy, because I never confronted my father about this, even on his deathbed when I went to be there for him as a son. I never confronted him about these issues. I just, in my mind, when he passed, part of that boy went with him, and I didn't have to hurt like that anymore.
Good. Good. Yeah.
Going back to my mother's situation, you had said about your mother wasn't able to protect herself, so she couldn't protect you. There was physical abuse, or domestic violence all throughout our home. That obviously my mother uh, and him would fight, and it got physical, and so yes, that is part of it. But Amy, and I have it written in my book, there is a note that my mother wrote me in my early 20s when I first started writing poetry, because she felt like I was going to confront her about some of this. Well, she took it upon herself and wrote me a note depicting she said that, the reason why she allowed it to happen is because she resented me. She didn't want another child at that time. She had already had three children. She was only 22 years old, 21, 22 years old, already had three children. She didn't want me. And so allowing him to do these things, there was no love. And
Mhm.
and and she even, admitted that in the letter, that that she grew to love me, you know
Yeah.
and
Terrible.
those
That's
words
terrible.
always stuck with me. I
Yeah.
grew to love you.
Mhm.
you know
Yeah, that's terrible. I've often wondered, I think my mom at times resented me. Um, I didn't come from a very, she, there was a, and I agree with you in talking about how the emotional abuse and the emotional trauma that we endure stems deeper, and it goes deeper than the physical abuse, or even, I endured some molestation and sexual abuse. But those emotional scars are the ones that really hang on and linger, I think, long into adulthood, and really affect us more, even sometimes, I think. Um, but yeah, my mom was not very nurturing. She was never the loving type. Not real, not real, huggy, feely, and
yeah,
just
mine
compassionate and
either.
caring.
Yeah.
My mom was never that way with me. And I had siblings. They were I had a half brother and a half sister, where, it was my stepdad who was our abuser. Um, it was his real kids. And
Right.
it was very different once, they were quite a bit younger than me. My brother, once we've all had our birthdays, we're each 7 years apart. So my younger sister is 14 years younger. My younger brother is 7 years younger. But yeah, he treated them very different. And it was, I was that typical redheaded stepchild, you know, if you can imagine that, where
Sure.
I was treated so different. So tell me a little bit about, at what point did you realize you needed to do some healing and to work on yourself and to go there?
Well, to be honest, again, throughout my teen years, I pushed everything so deep. Throughout my young adulthood, I had everything pushed so deeply that, again, I had only discussed a few things here and there with a few people in my life.
Mhm.
Um, it really wasn't until I started having children, and I started wanting a better life for them from what I was used to. And it really made me look back at my childhood and dissect it a lot, and to try to pinpoint where things went wrong. Why did this have to be this way? It's why couldn't, because like my son and I, and I've got daughters, and we all have such a great relationship, and but my son in general, because this is a father son type of story, we have a great relationship, and I just couldn't imagine treating my children the way I was treated. And that's just the physical and mental abuse, the neglect. I mean, we raised ourselves. We didn't have the huggy feely, I love yous. It was, you're on your own. If you make it, you make it. If you don't, you don't. I don't care if you go to school. I don't care about your education. It's, what can you bring into the household to help pay the bills? It's, you know what I mean? And so as I, got older, and I still hadn't really addressed the trauma. And it wasn't really, to be honest with you, it wasn't until about this last year that I really started opening up, when I started writing these books. I
Mhm.
told my wife, we've been together for 20 years. I told my wife that I should write a book about my life. And then I finally just sat down and did it. And I think she was kind of also shocked at some of the things that were in there, because her and I had never really discussed those things either. My siblings, when they read the book, they were like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that you had harbored these feelings all these years. I can remember bits and pieces, but I don't remember things like you did. And I guess that's just the thing about me, is I have such a great memory. It's a blessing and a curse, Amy. You know what I mean?
Mhm. Oh, yeah.
And
Absolutely.
because some of the things I'd rather not remember, and like we said, I cannot remember what a physical beating felt like. It just,
Mhm.
that's something that I can't even remember that, but I can remember how it felt to have to kiss that picture. I can remember how it felt to have him put out his finger and try to get me to eat, what was on it. I can remember, the feeling of just not being good enough. And the problem is I didn't understand what was good enough. What did I have to do to be good enough?
Yeah. What you're describing is often a lot of times people who have suffer from traumatic stress, post-traumatic stress disorder. A lot of people think and associate that with memories in the mind, and it's so much more than that. It's more about what the body remembers, the feelings. When someone is triggered, it is often a feeling that triggers that. It's not. It's it's rarely a memory. It's more of, okay, this feeling that I'm feeling right now is a feeling that I felt back then, and it's, it lives in the body and the nervous system specifically, um, and which is what causes your hypervigilance, your anxiety, your all these symptoms that are related to the post-traumatic stress disorder. um, so yeah, Ugh, I'm so sorry you had to go through that. And healing is messy and it's not linear. It's all over. Sometimes you're taking a step or two forward and then you take a step back.
Right.
And that's okay. That's okay. As long as you get up and continue every day, that is what's important because, I'm still healing. I still have made a really tough decision. I'm going to speak to possibly an a police officer about what it would look like if I decide to go back and prosecute. I'm seriously thinking about doing that. And it's the more I think about it, it's not necessarily just about me. I
Right.
don't want him to have the opportunity to do this to any other people. And he
Exactly.
is remarried, and I doubt it if his wife even knows. She has children. I don't know if it's happened possibly to them, or if and I think some of them may have grandchildren now. They may
So
have.
see, you're no longer
So
thinking about
it's not
yourself.
about me anymore. It's about protecting other people as well. So that is the main goal of why I'm thinking about doing this. Um, and I just think, writing for me, and it's why I've always been big into journaling and have not done my deeper healing until because I would journal about events and things and what happened, but really looking more at how those things made me feel, looking at the feelings and all of that is what kind of helps more to release some of that. Writing is a great way to process things, and it's why I do it. It's part of what I do it. And as I write a lot on Substack about different techniques and kind of it's kind of a guide for other people. And as I'm writing this, sometimes it's what I'm actually going through at the time, what I'm working on at the time. Um, what else have you done for yourself to kind of um, help you along the lines of healing and all of
Well,
that?
well, my healing also has come through the writing.
Mhm.
Because I never openly discussed it with anybody. When I started putting it down, typing it, and reading it back to myself, it was so, and you're going to relate to this, it was so soul cleansing.
Mhm.
It was like, oh my God, I finally got that out. It's
Mhm.
finally out. It's when I put it, on this page, it is out. It is no longer hidden. And it really allowed me an opportunity by putting it out there to let everybody who reads it, and maybe nobody reads it. My wife read it. If it gives her a little bit better understanding of why I am the way that I am, then I've done what I set out to do. Is I needed to release it and I needed to get it out. So as far as, like, I didn't seek out any counseling or anything like that. Um, not that not that I don't need it. I mean, but it's just by putting it down on paper was like step number one. It was like, oh my
Mhm.
gosh, I finally have released this. And so when I did write the first book, and then I realized, you know what, there's still a little bit more in that closet I need to say. So then I went ahead and wrote the second book.
Mhm.
And then I thought, as I was going through that process, I started to feel myself just feeling better, and I thought, okay, now I need to dig a little deeper, and I need to understand the parents that were involved in this, and I need to understand a little background on them. So then I started writing about my mom's background, and I wrote about my dad's background, and I called that book Collide. When two storms collide,
Mhm.
I'm the result.
Yeah.
of that
I love
collision.
that. I love that.
Uh,
And being able to do that, I think, looking at from their perspective, that is huge. That's being on a way to forgiveness almost, because it's like you're
right,
trying to empathize with, not only did this happen, but why did it happen?
right.
And that's huge with healing for sure. With, like, for instance, with me, with my mom, um, she came from a very dysfunctional family. Her dad was an alcoholic. He was abusive. It's a cycle, and it's those things that are accepted as
And
just the
that's
way they are. Yeah.
and that is perfect, because from Collide is the final book called Generations, and it discusses
Mhm.
exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
This has been going on long before us, long before our parents, long before our grandparents. This has
Mhm.
been going on for hundreds of years, and it just
Yeah.
trickles down. And it may be a little trait here, a little trait here, a little trait here, and it trickles down, and it's something that's been accepted over the years. And that's why I started, my hashtag ERPACT, Ed Rivera, Parents Against Childhood Trauma.
Yeah.
It's like, we don't have to pass this down anymore. We can put a stop to it right here.
Yeah.
We,
We're the
we make
cycle
that
breakers.
decision. That's right. We're the cycle
Yeah, we're the
breakers.
cycle breakers. Absolutely.
At some
Enough is enough.
point, at some point, we are going to be the generation that's being discussed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's my book, Generations. It's no longer talking about blame. It's no longer talking about healing, about pain. It's talking about, what do we do as parents to break that cycle? How can we break that cycle moving forward so our children don't have to worry about trying to break a cycle? The cycle's been broke.
Right. 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 I
So,
love that. I love that. Oh, yeah. And there's something about when we're writing, suppression of feelings is often what causes depression, anxiety, all those symptoms. That's why it's so important, and writing is a way to release those feelings. It's important to allow ourselves to feel that a little bit, and getting
sure.
it down on paper, typing it out is a good release of those feelings. So I love that for you. I love that for you.
There was so many tears shed in the
Mhm.
read back after I'm proofreading everything and spell checking and all that. The read back was more emotional than writing it, because I'm flowing, right? I'm flowing.
Mhm.
And then when I'm reading it back, and then that emotion just hits you
Mhm.
like a ton of bricks.
Yeah. Yeah, as you're processing while you're writing. I know there's been many times I've been writing, and something will just hit me, and I've had to take breaks because the emotions are so intense. Um, yeah, 100%. Oh, we have a lot in common. We have a lot in common. I'm so glad I met you.
Same
Yeah.
here. Yeah.
So what else? What else? Like, what are you looking towards for the future for Ed? What's in the future for Ed?
Well, again, I have children that I have grown children, and I have children that are still being molded to this day. Um, and being able to be there for my children in ways that our parents probably were not.
It
Uh,
sounds like, to me, it sounds like you have done a great job being a
Thank you.
dad,
And that is
recognizing.
priority number one to me. I've always said that my role as a father is the most important role I have, above and beyond being a good son, a good brother, a good friend, even a good husband. My role as a father changes lives down the road.
Yeah.
And so what I'm trying to do is, I'm trying to teach my children there is a better way than what I knew. The thieving, the lying, the just general chaos that happened in my life. I want my children to know you work hard for what you want. If your feelings are hurt, let's discuss them. In my household, there was no discussion. Too bad, so sad. Move on.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? So I just my role as a father in itself, believe it or not, helps me to heal because I'm reliving my childhood in their lives, and
Right.
I'm wanting their lives to be the childhood that I didn't have. I'm wanting to be the father that I dreamed of, just was never possible because again, he had his own demons from being at war at 21, 22 years old, killing or be killed,
Mhm.
watching your friends die in front of you. um, I couldn't imagine that kind of trauma that a person would have to live with. So my dad never spoke of the war, never, except for one time he spoke to a pastor a couple of years before his death, and because he was very interested in the Korean War history, and so my dad spoke about it. That's the only time I ever knew my father to speak of the war.
Mm.
And so it's a very traumatic thing that he went through.
Mhm.
And my mom grew up in girls' homes because she was molested by her father, and they were taken away out of their household, and she was separated from her brothers all of
Mhm.
their lives, and so she grew up in girls' homes, and just again, a broken child becomes a broken adult, and back in that generation, there was no let's talk about your feelings.
Mhm. Right. It was more the common to sweep things under the rug. You just move on and pretend like they don't happen. Don't
That's
let it
right.
bother
That's
you.
right.
Just move on. Yep.
And that's kind of what it was like in for me too. Is
Mhm.
we didn't openly discuss at family reunions and stuff like these are not subjects that generally come up, but
Right.
again, I'm 55 years old, and my siblings just found out that I was harboring all these feelings, like
Mhm.
over the last 6 months to a year.
Yeah.
And so they just didn't understand the gravity of it.
Yeah. How it affected you. Yeah. Well, how is your relationship with them now? Are you close with them?
As close as you can be. I
Mhm.
mean, Amy, I've been taught one thing that's not very good about living a life like that is I always I always felt like it was me against the world. And so I'm kind of a loner in that sense.
Mhm.
I don't I'm not one of those people that I need to have that relationship. I do have a great relationship with my siblings as far as, I keep them at arm's length though, you know what I mean? But I'm just not a person that needs that. What I need
That's good.
is is for my children
Mhm.
to have a better life. That's the only thing that I need in my life, and so I try to focus on that. And again, I talk to my siblings, and they understand my feelings on it, and they agree. And some of them don't want to talk about trauma at all because they've got their own demons. But um, it's something that, again, I'm not a person that has a bunch of friends. I think it's just I found it hard growing up to find my own role in my own family, and so as I got older and trauma building on trauma, it just I'm just not that guy. you know, I'm just a loner.
Yeah, I can relate a lot to that. That really resonates with me. I am kind of the same way, and I think a lot of that has to do with people who deal with the deep trauma. You kind of get used to that because initially that's not spoken of, and it's a part of you, and it's a piece of you, but it's not something you share.
Right.
And so you kind of become this person who shelters yourself a little bit and doesn't open up. And
Sure.
therefore that kind of carries into, you know, but I used to be a big people pleaser, anything and everything to get people to like me,
Oh,
but
me
not
too.
being real open about who I am, in my deep parts.
Well,
But
that's why I think we've discussed, I call
mhm,
unmasked.
mhm,
I'm unmasking myself.
mhm.
I'm finally taking off the mask and letting
Yeah,
everybody see the real me and the real
right,
trauma behind that mask.
right, right. And that makes a lot of people uncomfortable
Yes.
because a lot of people don't, either they can't imagine or they don't want to imagine. They don't want to go there. And, with my unmasking, um, I am in solitude a lot, but I've kind of intentionally done that because I want to continue to work on myself and I don't need others' opinions. I don't need others' views on what might be acceptable or what what might not be acceptable. And so in working on my own self, I've kind of intentionally done that. And I have in sense, um, I've lost a lot of relationships, but I realized a lot of them were very superficial
Sure.
and not true friends to begin with. Um, someone who's going to stand by me in the hard times.
And I think
Um,
I made a post on TikTok or Facebook or Instagram or something at one point or another. And I made a post and I said, there are people out there in your own circle that do not want to see you heal. That's just the reality in it.
yeah,
They don't want to
and
see you heal.
that's because they're used to your old self, and that's who
Well, and it makes
they
their lives
can.
seem better.
Mhm. When you're not setting boundaries, it's beneficial for them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. 100%. Oh, goodness. Yeah. Yeah, we have a lot in common.
We do. I was just fixing to say the same thing. We do have a lot in common when it comes to that.
Mhm.
And I imagine we're probably around the same age. You may
Yeah.
be,
I just
yeah.
turned 50. I just
Okay.
turned 50 a couple months ago. So yeah. Yeah, we're in that same generation. I think we come from that same thing where it's like you don't discuss the dirty laundry in the family. You
Yep.
don't discuss, and the cycles they do run so deep. It's generational.
Sure.
It's just in the past, it's what was accepted, you know. It's kind of like in my case where the deep things aren't discussed. We'll talk about superficial things and you just kind of move along and you don't discuss it. It may be discussed a little bit and just in that time, but then you just forget about it and move on.
Right.
And don't you deal with it by not dealing with it, by just pushing it away.
And there's
Um,
plenty of families that do that,
mhm,
and they just don't
yeah,
understand the damage that's being done
mhm.
by just sweeping it under the rug, and
Yeah,
it's
and I don't pardon me, I don't have any children. I because of some of the abuse I endured, I was never able to. Um, but I'm working on my relationship, excuse me, with my brother and with my sister, and letting them know that, they're very aware of what happened to me. They are
okay.
very aware and they have seen how it's affected me. Um, I,
Well,
you
can I
know,
ask you?
yeah, yeah, go ahead.
Um, so at some point or another, this came out. Did your mother or whoever you told this to, did they immediately believe you, or did you have to convince them? You know
I
what I
have
mean?
to
Because
convince.
oftentimes, in situations like yours, it's like, that didn't take place, and you have to convince them that it did, instead of
Yeah.
just,
My mom was in denial. My mom
yeah,
was in denial and chose to believe him for a while. When I was 15, when they finally did divorce, it was because I told an uncle.
gotcha.
I told somebody else.
Yeah, okay.
And I think he kind of took control of the
Matters. Yeah,
situation
yeah,
and was like, this is what's going to happen.
right.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
And that was very wise to do that, because you seen you were, I mean, you were still stuck in the same
Mhm.
living situation, even after,
Mhm.
going to somebody that you trusted that would do something about it.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, my relationship with my brother and sister, though, it's one of those where it's like I want to help them, and I am constantly telling them I want better for us. I want our relationship to be better. I want us to be able to discuss things. And I'm learning more about them and what they're willing to accept and what they're not willing to accept, what they're willing to kind of tolerate from me. And it's not all, it's not, it's not all good, you know. Um, but I'm learning more and more about,
Did they resent you for a while for bringing this out in the open,
yeah,
and
yeah.
about how
Well,
long before you
my
were able
sister was
to?
only, see, their relation, they remember their dad very differently than I do. Remember, they're
Right.
a lot younger than me.
Yeah.
And I was just 15 when my mom finally left him. So my sister was a baby. My brother was 7, 7 or 8, around in there. And, they remember a different dad than what I remember him to be. And a little bit of background. My biological dad, my real dad, was not in the picture. I didn't meet him until I was 16.
Oh, wow.
And that's a whole nother story. But
Okay.
yeah. Um they so we're kind of working on our relationship. I know I have not disclosed to them yet some of my plans and what I might be doing. And I know my sister is kind of close to her dad. My brother is not as much because they see and know what he did to me. And um it's hitting them. I think
Yeah.
it's hitting them.
Well, and if they're, especially if they have children,
Mhm. And they
and
do, and that's part of what has been triggering to me lately
yeah,
is my sister, my youngest sister has children. They both have children that were
yeah,
my age when
right.
all of this was going on. And so it's kind of what's brought it to the surface again a little bit
Yeah,
within our family dynamics with them.
yeah,
Um, yeah, so I've set some very hard boundaries with them. And it's been very healing for me to be able to do that
good.
because I used to just accept their relationship with their dad, where I'm not doing that as much anymore because I don't understand why they would even want to have a relationship with
Right.
him, knowing what not just what he did to me, but what he is.
And what about, is your mother living or is she
He's
deceased?
living, and
Okay.
we're working on a relationship as well. Um, she's I'm gonna ask her to come to therapy with me again because there's a
Gotcha.
lot of unhealed um issues with me in our relationship and how she neglected me and didn't protect me.
Right.
Um, and
Both my parents are deceased.
okay,
My mom passed in 1999, and my dad in '06.
yeah,
Um, Both of them, again, I never confronted about, even, after my mother had wrote me that letter,
yeah,
and, I called her immediately after and lied to her and told her that I never felt unloved, that I
yeah,
never,
yeah.
because like you, I was a people pleaser, and
Mhm.
it was more important to me
To
to
keep the
not hurt
peace.
her, yeah, to keep the peace, and to
Mhm.
not have her, hurt and stuff like that. So I lied to her,
Yeah,
but it's something I carried with me for a long time.
yeah, and that's something that I did for a long time was I always felt like I was trying to protect my mom's feelings, my brother
Right.
and sister's feelings, and protecting them and not my own.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm becoming more authentically me and honoring myself, my feelings, and who I am, and not so much worrying about where they are because regardless, they're responsible for themselves. They're
Yes.
responsible for their own feelings, for their own, how they're going to cope with something. That's on them. That has to be on them. That shouldn't be on me. And I also realize that with me, that's also an issue of control, me wanting to have that control over how they're doing, how they're feeling. And I have to let that go too, you know.
Well, when my father passed away in 2006, again, I did the Good Son project, and I flew to California, and I was there by his side, and I felt like he was wanting to go, needing to go, but he was just hanging on to something. And so me and my sisters discussed me having to talk with him openly, and basically told him, go ahead, whatever, regrets you have in your life, you don't need to. You were a great father. We loved you, blah, blah, blah. Of course, I did what I had been taught all my life to do when you're in a situation like that, is lie.
Yeah.
And, and I lied. I believe it probably wasn't 24 hours later he passed away.
He needed that
And
closure
he
in
did.
order to pass.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he did. And I felt like he did, and we felt like he did. And, you know, and I guess I've always had the belief system that the man was dying. He knew he was dying. There was no reason to pour salt in the open wound, and, let him go in peace.
Yeah.
And,
That's part of the reason I want to do this now with like my mom, is because I don't want to be in that situation.
yeah,
That's really hard. That had to have been really hard to just kind of suck it up and
yeah.
just shut your own feelings down.
Right. Because
You
you're like at a moment in your life where you're like, damn it, I want to know why. You know what I mean? Not
Yeah.
that he could have answered me anyway, but it's
Yeah.
like you always ask why. Why was I never good enough? Why?
Mhm.
Why couldn't we have a good relationship? What,
Yeah.
all these reasons why. I was
I had no
35 at the
self-love.
time. Right.
Yeah, I had no self-love, no self-worth, no
Yeah.
self-respect. I had nothing.
Yeah. And that's part
Everything
of,
that
and I wrote about that in my book about, you know, I was always seeking approval, whether it be from women, whether it be, so there was, extramarital affairs, there was this, because I was always seeking that acceptance,
attention that we didn't
attention,
get as
right.
kids.
And
Yes,
so,
because we
but
needed that.
right. And so when I finally realized that, hey, this is not working, this is not going well, and again in my book, Child's Fragments of Childhood, there's a chapter in there. It's called New State, Same Ghosts, because I left California and moved to Tennessee at the time, but my ghosts followed me.
Oh yeah. Wherever we go, there we are.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, is there anything you would like to leave with our listeners today or our viewers? Anything, any last words, anything you would like to
Sure.
add that you didn't get to share yet?
Well, probably the words that I want to leave are going to be the most important words that the listeners need to heal or hear, is healing. Healing is possible. No matter what age you are, healing is possible. But before we can heal, like we've discussed, you have to unmask yourself. You have to allow yourself to be free of this. You have to talk about it to friends, to family, to whoever is going to listen, and let you get it off of your chest through therapists, through whatever healing, form that you decide to take. But the thing that I want them to know is it is possible.
Yeah. Never give up hope.
And never give up hope. Hope is it's not going to come in a straight line.
Mm-mm.
It's going to, like you said, you're going to backstep. Just keep moving forward, and it will eventually get you in a place you want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think, for me, I am, the whole reason I do this is I want to be that voice for people who feel they have none yet, to give people hope and to know and understand that healing is possible, that you can have a better life. I think so many people just kind of stream through life and on autopilot because they're so emotionally shut down, and that's
Well, and
not
they
a,
have the same
that's
belief
not a
that we
healthy life.
had. They have the
Yeah.
same belief that we had. Nobody cares about my trauma.
Yeah.
Nobody
Yeah.
cares what I'm going through.
Mhm.
And
And if
I,
that's the case, then you're hanging around the wrong people.
right, exactly. That's what I was trying to get those words out that,
Yeah.
if you don't have a good support system in your life, get rid of who's ever holding you back.
Yep. Go find them
Because
somewhere else.
if they're holding you back, kick them to the curb. I don't
Right.
care if it's I don't care who they are in your life, even
Yeah.
siblings.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
I mean, if they're holding you back, kick them to the curb. Find somebody new. Move on.
Yeah.
You'll be better for it.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely. Now, if something in this episode resonated with you, that's not by accident, and your story is not over. And no matter where you are right now, you are still capable of rising. If you're ready to go deeper, come join me on Substack where at riseofthephoenixcoach.substack.com. This is where I share more of my story, my tools, and my real-time insights. And if you're looking to work together, you can visit my webpage at riseofthephoenixcoach.com to learn more about Rise of the Phoenix Coach with one-on-one coaching. Here we rebuild confidence, reignite inner strength, and rise up to a life of peace, love, and true happiness. And if this episode spoke to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. That's how this movement grows. One story, one voice, one rise at a time. Until the next time, stay grounded, stay aware, and keep rising. Thank you.